Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jessica Rich, and on this channel, we talk about all things self love, self worth, self development, self care, anything that helps you become a better version of yourself. We talk about it here. In addition to all those things, we talk about travel experiences, there's a little bit of vlogging, really anything that I feel like in this season of life will really help contribute to someone else who's stuck at a crossroads, who needs to self prioritize themselves, or just looking for some inspiration. You're going to find it on this channel. During my last video, I shared about how losing my dad really taught me why it's important to live life to the fullest. And so today I want to go a little bit deeper and talk about me making one of the biggest decisions of my life, which is walking away from corporate America after 18 years. And so today I want to share what it really felt like to not only walk away from corporate America, but the fears, the silence, and the voices I had to navigate to choose myself. And so when you think about just the fears that you may experience, for me, there was a fear of leaving stability. Here I am, 18 years into this career. I had held multiple roles. It afforded me the opportunity to do a lot of things. And so I had a steady paycheck, I had great benefits. And for some people, I had the title. And although stability was a concern for me, I just had to remind myself, Jessica, all you need is a mustard seed of faith, because I could not imagine going back into such a toxic environment. That was just my personal opinion. That's how I felt. I knew how I felt when I went out. And the thought of going back alone was creating anxiety. And so there was this fear of leaving stability, but I had to remind myself, like, don't worry about it. God'll make a way. Don't worry about it. I also was thinking about, like, what can I do? And so when I talk about like the opportunity for me to become a full-time professor, the way that it worked out, I couldn't have prayed for a better opportunity. And so that gave me some comfort. But there was a little fear about leaving that stability because every 2 weeks I knew that a check was coming, right? I knew that I had great benefits. I had established these relationships with my providers. And so now I know that that may look differently, but what exactly did that look like? And I wasn't sure when I made the decision to leave, but I knew that there could be a concern. The fear of the unknown, right? What if this doesn't work? I know I've seen a lot of people talk about leaving corporate America. Even most recently, the hot topic is Tabitha Brown telling entrepreneurs to get a job and return to work. Well, for me, it was like, what exactly? I was not at a place where I knew exactly what I wanted to do as a full-time entrepreneur. And so I wasn't prepared for that. And so my mind is like, what if this doesn't work? What if I fail? And I will tell you one thing that I told myself is like, I will not go back. Things may be unknown, but I will not go back. And so thinking about all the possibilities and things that I could do. Luckily for me, I've been in the industry for a long time. And so there were things that I will be able to do that may not be in a leadership role. And I was completely fine with that. But that fear of the unknown, because I was not that individual that had the year to 1 to 3 years of salary saved, and I had this put in place and that put in place. That wasn't me. And so there was this unknown, but I started thinking about all the things that I could do with the skill sets that I had. And that included not going back into a leadership role, but there were things that I knew that I could do temporarily, and I had to be open to it. Fear of disappointing family, maybe some of like my coworkers or even myself. I didn't really deal with this a lot when it came to disappointing myself, because I felt like I had gotten to a place that I was proud of myself for even taking the first step to go out on leave. And so that in itself was a lot. When it comes to the fear of family, I have 7 siblings. And so I feel like being the first to go off to college, there was just a lot of things that may have been self implied pressure that I felt like I've always carried certain things or had to be the first or had to do this, and that. In reality, I did not. And I finally was at a place in life where I had to relieve myself of some of that pressure. And so I wasn't really worried about disappointing my family. When I talked about in the first video, me like talking to my mom and knowing that she fully supported me, that's all I needed. As far as my peers, especially like in the industry and I work with, I wasn't concerned about disappointing them. But I will say there are some people that I am friends with, that I've built relationships with. And so in their mind, they are attached to the corporate Jessica. They are attached to the senior level leader Jessica. And so even before I made the official decision that I wanted to go out, you could see that there was some hesitation from them. Like, well, make sure you have this in place, or consider this, or I know this person that's experiencing XYZ. Some of that sometimes just comes from projecting fears of the unknown, or for them not having the courage to make that decision. And so I had to be aware of that. But I did get a little bit of that. It wasn't that I was the fear of disappointing them, but I can see that they were somewhat disappointed that the Jessica that they had come to know, that may have inspired them, that may have been an unofficial mentor, that may have been an inspiration for them in their career path, will no longer look the same. And so I was able to immediately acknowledge that, especially after conversations, and realize, okay, Jessica, they have to get to a place where they accept that's no longer the Jessica where you are. You've outgrown that Jessica, and you're a new season in life. And so it may be an adjustment for them, but that's not something for you to carry or to make them understand. And so I was able to really quickly like address that, identify it, and check myself that that's not for you to carry. And I want to thank my therapist for that. So I'll talk about just an example of maybe a fear of me thinking about me resigning. And so I have a house, and I was starting to think about, like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? Will I be able to maintain this? Will I be able to travel? And so it was more related, like making sure I could stay on top of my bills, making sure I could take care of my responsibilities. My mom has always been really big on credit. And so the first thing is like, I got to keep my credit where it needs to be. But, those are probably little things that I was thinking about, really just like making sure things are taken care of. I remember I was talking to my financial advisor, and it's so funny. She's like, are you currently over there eating beanies and weenies? If not, you're good. She was like, and it's okay if you get to a place where you have to make some huge adjustments. You need to start doing that now. But most importantly, she was like, the things that you're worried about, especially about your house, she was like, the bank wants you to keep your house. They're not trying to take that house from you. And I love that she was a woman who is very openly about how multiple times she almost lost everything. And then now she's in her 50s, she's thriving, she has a successful business. And it's not to say that like she wants me to get to a place where I almost lose everything, but it's a reminder that like you're going to be okay. It may not look like what you want it to look like. It may not look like what you're used to. Me being in corporate America, having a paycheck every 2 weeks, getting an annual bonus. For some people on the outside looking in, I was doing great. And so I feel like that stability of thinking about just, all right, I got these bills that need to be paid. Is this a concern? And then having that conversation with her, like, listen, I'm proof that you may lose everything more than once, but you can still be successful, and you can still come out on top. And so that was probably one example that I could share. Navigating the silence. So loneliness can come with stepping away because people won't understand the choices that you make. Prime example, me kind of sharing with some individuals how it's feeling, the questioning of returning, and immediately they projected their fears on me. In addition to that, they are thinking about all the things that I could be walking away from. And it's so important to realize that you have to move in silence. I know this is very cliche, but people unintentionally will project their fears on you, or will be negative and not even realize that's what they're doing. And some people mean well, they do, but they are afraid of you failing. They are afraid of you losing everything by walking away. They're afraid of the stability that you lose, but those are things that you need to worry about. Yes, you'll have some people in your corner that will help you have that reality check moment. Like, hey, I'm not telling you what to do. Just want to make sure you've considered these things. Maybe these are some resources. I think that's very healthy. But there will be people who just will try to steer you in a different direction that that you're no longer aligned with. And so this can be a very lonely process if you don't have somebody that you can confide in. For me, it was my mom. And so I was blessed to have that. But everybody doesn't have that one person, right? And so you may have to do it alone, and that's okay. That is absolutely okay. The silence of not having a set career, my identity specifically is tied to this role, this title, this company. And after walking away, it became a space for me where I could reflect and I really could hear my own voice. And I'm not even talking about when I resigned. It was when I made the decision to go out on leave. I had this opportunity now to really, really listen to what Jessica wanted, I was able to identify what Jessica struggled with. And when I mean struggle with, what was causing me to be anxious, what was causing me to experience stress, what was increasing my blood pressure. I remember just within a few hours, I had an appointment and my blood pressure was checked. Blood pressure was fine. Okay. And then I had to have a conversation about just some experiences that I had in the workplace. And I tell you, I I checked my blood pressure after. I had to go to a different appointment. My blood pressure was completely different. It was considered high. And so for me, the silence included a lot of self-reflection, a lot of blocking out the outside noise, a lot of remembering and experiencing, and some of the experience I say is almost like PTSD, what I went through and how I did not want to feel like that ever again. And so I had a chance to like really talk to myself and say, like, Jessica, you deserve better than this. You don't deserve to feel that way. Me being able to have those moments of silence really, really helped me to just have some conversations with myself, in addition to having some conversations with God. But then it also allowed me to make that decision for myself. And I think that was one of the most critical pieces when it came to this journey. Let's talk about the outside voices. And so I talked a little bit about how I've experienced some people projecting their fears. Why would you want to leave a good job? Why would you want to leave these benefits? You get this annual bonus every year. You're not going to get that anywhere else. I heard it all. Now, I am nowhere near close to retirement. And so I do have a lot of friends that are closer to retirement within the next 5 to 10 years, whether that is early retirement or full retirement age. I do have friends that are close to that. And so for them, I knew that they wouldn't quite understand. I did have a thought that maybe some would, but I do know that because they had been working in the industry or with their company for 20, 30, 40 years for some, they wouldn't quite understand it. And so I could not allow those outside influences really affect how I made this decision or how I live my life. And a prime example would be, I remember I was talking to a manager that I really respected. And I was telling him about like the stress. And I was like, I don't want to be in an environment that's stressful. And he was basically like, wherever you go, you're going to experience stress. And so I was like, I understand that in life and things that we do, there's different levels of stress. When you experience stress that affects your health, that's the situation where you have to step away. And so that when I think about that conversation with him, I think about like, wow, other people may say something similar because we've been conditioned to get a good job, retire from that job, and that's the cycle of life, right? Get a good job, you stay there, you retire, you enjoy your retirement, that's it, the circle of life. But in reality, it shouldn't be that way, especially if you don't enjoy the job or it no longer serves you or you're no longer aligned with it. And so you want to be able to balance interacting with individuals who encourage you and avoid the critics. And you sometimes cannot determine how people will respond. Maybe the person that you think will not be supportive will be the most supportive. And then the person that you are looking to be supportive is not supportive. And so you have to be intentional about blocking out those outside noises when it comes to you making this decision. And that's why it's important to move and navigate in silence, because you just never know. And we subconsciously can, take in what people are saying. And even though you think you may be okay when you're having the conversation with them, you may be processing that question, that doubt that they're having. And it could make you like make a decision that doesn't align with what you want for your life. So you have to be so intentional about outside voices. That doesn't just include coworkers and friends, that includes family. Yes, unfortunately, that includes family, because a lot of what we have been conditioned to do is kind of passed down from family, although society has also kind of passed it down to them. We're not too far removed from slavery. And so you have to remember, as you are in a different generation, or maybe you're, I would say like as a millennial, this is how I'm experiencing it. But I say this, you don't have to be just a millennial to make this type of decision wherever you are in life. Age and generation doesn't matter, but a lot of those things came from what they were taught and what they learned. I know for a fact, like my mom and dad, a lot of things they instilled in us came from what they were taught and what they were raised. And so it is so important that You be intentional about those outside noises and what you allow to come in. You got to protect your peace because others will project their fears regardless of what you think. I have been beyond blessed that my mom has been very supportive, but I am not going to sit here and say that I'm not aware that everybody's not going to have that experience. And so for you, you may want to reevaluate the people in your life, and you just feel, if you just feel like you need someone to support you, here's some things to consider. You may want to consider a coach, you may want to consider a therapist. I had both. And so they were very supportive in this process and were sounding boards for me to talk through, but both very encouraging. And so me having that in addition to my mom was huge, was huge. And so I would say to you, if you feel like you don't have anybody in your life that can do that, utilize those resources. You probably can, seek out those individuals and have those conversations free of charge, because if you work for an employer, it's probably a part of your benefits. But if you don't feel, if you really just absolutely feel like you need to talk to somebody, you may want to consider that. So I'll just wrap up this video saying walking away wasn't easy. And so I don't want to make anyone think that I just woke up one morning and made the decision like, I'm going to quit, I'm going to resign, I'm walking away, and everything was peaches and cream. But it was a process that allowed me to really self-reflect, make a decision. I had been thinking about it for months. I had applied for other jobs in the past. And so what I see now is it wasn't time. Those did not align with where I am now. And so I needed to stay where I was, because it wasn't just about jumping from one company to the next. It was about finding what makes me happy and gives me the harmony that I wanted. And so not sure I would have gotten that with another company in another role or position that probably would have had more responsibilities, probably would have came with more money, but it would have had more responsibilities. And so I could have experienced that same stress and anxiety and all of the other things that came with the burnout. So me being where I am today, I do think that that was like, this is where you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to leave. So that this timing and the way things worked out, especially with losing my father, it was perfectly placed. Walking away gave me this freedom to really align with my purpose. And I will say that me making the decision to not share it with everyone, be very intentional about not projecting or allowing people to project their fears, not being, not feeding myself my fears. So I purchased this book, God's Promises, and it was one thing that I would read daily. I still do read it often. I don't read it every day now. I do still read it weekly, especially in the evening is more when I read it before bed. But I got the book God's Promises. And so it's a bunch of scriptures that are outlined based on like fear. It can be money. It can be health, faith. And so I would just kind of go through how I was feeling that day or what I was experiencing or what I had experienced, and then read scriptures under like that topic specifically. But that helped me. That really, really helped me with when I would get those thoughts or concerns, that like reminding myself everything was going to be okay. And so that's one thing that I did when it came to overcoming my fears and staying positive. And, really just thinking about, even though fear, silence, and the outside voices will always be there to a certain extent, we have to really remember that our voice matters. All right. And when it comes down to it, we only have one life to live, and you live that life. No one else lives that life for you. And so you have to choose yourself if you don't do anything else. Think about where you are in your journey. Are you at a crossroads? If you're experiencing fear or if there's some self-doubt, what exactly are you saying to yourself? What's the fear that you're worried about? Maybe you want to write it down. And as you're thinking about the fears, think about the positive side of that. So writing down your fears. Silence. Are you having those moments of stillness where you can really reflect? And I know everybody don't have a situation where they're on a leave. And so I had a lot more time than others. And so are you building in those moments of silence where you can self-reflect? Maybe you're journaling, maybe you're sitting out on the patio, you're going for a walk, but be very intentional where you have those moments of reflection. And then also identify the people that can be an outside voice, and whether it's negative or positive, do you want them a part of this process? Because for me, I didn't have everyone a part of the process. Even if I assumed they would be positive, I chose not to have them a part of this process. And so you may need to do the same, because even though you're not at the point of leaving, you don't realize that you have those negative voices that is preventing you from even getting a plan in place. And so I know that for me, I was able to walk away from a situation that no longer served me. Is not aligned with the season I am in life. And I am so happy with the opportunity that was presented to me. Timing of it could not have happened better. I could not have prayed for a better situation, but it was because I truly believed in myself and I reminded myself I was going to be okay. And so for you, if you're at a place where you're feeling, you're unsure, do those things. Like take some time over the next 30, 60 days, write out your fears, think about silent moments, when you can do that, when you can have time to be still. And then also those outside voices, how do you block those? How do you prevent yourself from getting trapped into others projecting their fears on you? I hope this video was helpful. I know that I kind of rambled a little bit, but I hope that you got what you needed to at least give you some motivation and encouragement. And you know what? If you feel like you have some questions and you're just kind of stuck, I offer free consultations. They're 20 minutes. I would love to connect with you. If you would like, we can just talk about where you are and I can just share either a specific example that I went through or something that I did, or to give you some suggestions or advice. I'm completely open to that because I want others in this season of their life or where they are in their crossroads or the path of their journey to know that like you have support out here. You just need to know where to go. And I can be one of those resources for you just to kind of cheer you on. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please be on the lookout for the next video as there's going to be more topics along me navigating this transition in life. And I will see you on the next one. Bye.